everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm delighted to be here with you today and to introduce Nick, who is going to be speaking to us with a really powerful and amazing story. I met Nick at the AICHE, the Chemical Engineering conference, annual conference at a Michigan reception. And he was so inspiring and so passionate. We definitely wanted to bring him back to campus to meet with a variety of students. And so that's what his day has been. And so thanks for being here and being a part of this. I was so excited to have you here and to now able to be recording this and sharing this out more broadly with folks. So thank you, Nick, and welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Nick. Right now, I am a postdoctoral researcher at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, but so I'm at Oak Ridge right now, but from 2009 to 2016, I was an undergrad here at Michigan, and my time here was interesting to say the least. So, but before we get into my story, just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Sterling Heights, Michigan, where I was born and raised. I then went on to get my bachelor's in chemical engineering from here at Michigan, where I finished in December of 2016. I then went on to get my PhD at Clemson, also in chemical engineering, in 2023, which then brings me to where I am right now at Oak Ridge. And so just some fun pictures here. Here's my my 17-pound cat that I adopted when I was a third year at Clemson. These are some of my friends that I met here at Michigan. A fun fact, techno was invented in Detroit, which is kind of the foundation of electronic music. And so this was the catalyst of a lot of our friendships. And so basically everyone here is a Wolverine. Some other fun things we've done, and then music is a big part of my life. I don't actually play any instruments, but growing up in my grandpa's basement and playing pool with him, I have the musical taste of an old man. And so I have like 200 records. And so this is one of my very special corners of my apartment. And I also have this pool banner here that Dr. Montgomery got me when I defended my thesis. So pretty cool. And then this is me with my grandparents. My grandma Shirley is no longer with us, but my grandpa Al is still kicking at 86 years old. And as you'll see from this story, they're my heroes, and they played a big part in this story. So before we jump into some of the Michigan stuff, just one thing about me that is part of my identity is that I was born with sensory neural hearing loss, which is really just a fancy term for partial deafness from birth. And so, this happened in 1991. So this happened in 1991, and obviously technology 34 years ago isn't what it is today. So doctors are unsure why this happened. So what we have here is a hearing chart. And if you go from left to right, we have frequency against decibels lost. So people with normal hearing would have zeros across the top here from left to right, with your red circles being your right ear and your blue X's being your left ear. And as you can see, as we go from low to high frequencies, you start to see these symbols dip, indicating a loss in hearing. So this is typically high frequencies, which is female voices. So in the day of technology, where a lot of operators for health insurance and other medical appointments and things are, computers, when those computers are female voices, it can be extremely difficult for me to hear what they're saying. So I find myself writing down the numbers to know how to navigate through the system. Another thing to point out here is this dip here in the middle here. These frequencies do correlate to sounds that we hear, but they're also important for interpreting things. So even though I can hear noises, it can be challenging for me to interpret them. But fortunately, my family wanted me, and even right now, I just wanted to be treated like everybody else. So they put me through like speech classes and then facial recognition type training that basically allowed me to fluently lip read, which allowed me to navigate life and my goal just honestly being treated just like everybody else. And so as I mentioned, technology today is much better than it was in the 90s. So my hearing aids look like this. I have them in right now, actually. They're pretty tiny, so you wouldn't even recognize them. But back in the day, I was wearing a belt and a big headset and navigating a Metro Detroit public school system. I was a magnet for bullying. And so it really shaped me into who I am today and gave me a better appreciation for this community. And one of the things that I want to do with my career is inspire people to pursue STEM degrees, because the amount of hard of hearing people in the country is 3%, and the amount of us that are in STEM-based careers is, pretty low. And then even a step further, the amount that are in STEM that get PhDs is like 0.001%, something crazy like that. So when I got my PhD in chemical engineering, like I was probably one of only a handful that whole year. And so, yeah, I'm not going to change the narrative on this, but if I can move the needle a little bit, this is just something that's very personal to me. Okay, so then to navigate this, they have these things called card captioning, which stands for Communication Access Real-Time Translation Services. So what happens is there's a card captioner that has this keyboard here, and it's not a traditional like ASD, GHF keyboard. Each of these numbers is a syllable of the English language, and these are used in my courtrooms, in class, and it allows them to type things in real time. So when I was here in Michigan, I had this in all of my classes. The person would come to class with me and type these up. Especially people from other countries that are not native English speakers, it can be really difficult for me to hear them. So I still use this today at Oak Ridge, actually, and this is what the screen looks like when we're on Teams. The captioner will fill things in here, and sometimes we'll chat if she doesn't understand certain words, because hollow fiber membrane, CO2 carbon captures, a narrow corner of the world. And one thing that's really frustrating is if you ever watch TV or even being on like a really laggy like Zoom feed, when the video and audio aren't in sync, it's a fraction of a second. It's extremely annoying for me because I'm like lip reading in the background to fill in small blanks, and when they're not in sync, it's just really difficult for me to make out what's going on. So just a little bit about me on this this piece of me. So okay, let's get into the story. So I grew up in Sterling Heights. I went to Utica Stevenson and also the Math Science Center for my schooling, and I was a much different person than I am right now. I struggled with depression at a time when honestly mental health wasn't as openly talked about as it is now, which I think is incredible. But in the 90s, it was a much different climate than it is right now. In short, I just really didn't enjoy being Nick Gregorich. So you take into account, I'm going to school, I'm wearing a bunch of cords and this hearing aid equipment. I'm dealing with people treating me differently because of that. And so honestly, during this time, my safe space was Halo, the video game, and to express how old I am. Halo 2 came out in 2004. So I bet a lot of people in undergrad weren't even born when that was around. So I was a lot different than I am right now. It seems, I think most people that know me now, it's hard to imagine, but I really didn't have very many friends. I didn't know any better. All I was allowed to do was go to school and play hockey. And so when I got home, I played Halo. I didn't do anything else. I didn't go to any high school dances. I really didn't have much of a social experience. And so between Halo and my grandparents, those were the two things that made me happy. This carried into Michigan, where I think at some point you're an adult and you're responsible for your own actions. But I just think with the way that I was coming into being at this campus, I was not at all prepared for the beast that was college. I had so much, I didn't know anything about myself, and there was so much pressure on me to perform well that when I got here, when those regiments were taken off of me and I was alone, I didn't know how to study or do anything for myself without someone really, really being, forcefully involved. And so I really was not comfortable in my own skin, and I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. It was a really weird time, and in short, I wasn't the best version of myself. I think that I was obviously I was extremely depressed, as I said earlier, and my version of this, and this still is today, is, I didn't enjoy being me, and so my thought was, I could just sleep all day. If I don't get out of bed and I sleep all day, I don't have to deal with being Nick Gregorich and living this terrible life that I feel like I'm living right now. Like, I don't enjoy this at all. So if I just sleep all day, then I don't have to think about it. That's less hours of the day that I have to be myself. And so, and honestly, this still kind of carries into today. I think of it as like a sine wave. Back in the day, the sine wave had it was happening so often where I would go through these lows and it would go for days or weeks or months at a time. And even every once in a while, I'll still be in my own head with things. Obviously, things are a lot better now. I've found ways to navigate this and have figured out, how to be the best version of myself. But at this time, I did not know how to do that. And so, just some fun pictures along the way here. This was my freshman roommate that I lived with in Markley and is still my best friend today. And so he's always been very supportive of me, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. So some other fun photos. This was from Engine 100. I really dug into the archive here with these. This last week was definitely interesting, digging back and really remembering what my life was like 10, 15 years ago compared to now. So this was Engine 100. I took the aerospace and the class, and we built the blimp. So here's me about to control the blimp over in the aerospace building. So here's my transcript. It is interesting to say the least. So the first semester here, if we focus in, I got a 3.4. That's not too bad. But what happened was I had all these AP exams, and I was so burnt out from high school that I either didn't try or honestly didn't even show up to a lot of them. So when I got here in the fall, a lot of these classes were really what I was taking in high school. So I didn't really have to apply myself yet or really learn how to study as, an engineer at this, very prestigious university. We then dive into winter 2010, and, we got a 2-3 here. As we start to get into Orgo and lab and Calc 2. Then next semester, I tried taking, Chem E 230, material energy balances. I got a 1.4 this semester. And as we see, we just keep getting worse and worse. For this semester here, I got a half. And so I kept thinking that I was going to go home for break, or that over the summer, as I was working odd jobs at Hardee's and a Bloomfield Hills Country Club, that I was going to come back and I was going to figure this out. But honestly, I came back and it was the same result over and over again. I did not have control over my mental well-being, and I didn't have a structured way of navigating me and making myself happy and doing things for myself. But at this time and place, I didn't know how to do that. So then this just kept going. We get into fall 11. We got a 2.4 here, so better than a half, but still not great. Winter 12, we got a 1.1, a 1.6, and then fall 13, which is where things got really dark. I got a 1.2 here, and honestly, I'm not even sure I finished the semester. I think I pulled out about a month before it ended, and stepped away for a whole year. It's definitely the darkest time of my life. At this point, all of my friends that I met here, I graduated, which was, shameful to think in itself. You come here with a cohort of people, you live in the dorms, they had all graduated and had jobs, and I was still, trying to get through like sophomore level classes. And so this was without question my rock bottom. And not going to go into the great details, but if you use your imagination, you're probably taking a pretty close guess to what was going on during this time. I didn't want to be Nick Gregorich, and quite honestly, I didn't want to be here. Similar to when I was gripping the steering wheel in my car outside of the Detroit or the Sterling Heights Public Library. And so I pulled out of school for a year and really had to reevaluate what I was doing with my life. So I then picked up a job. I'm not sure how many in-staters are here at Nino Salvaggio. Amazing grocery store, by the way. Still love that place. I was a deli guy over in Clinton Township on Hall Road there. And this is where I worked for a good year. Slicing cold cuts. You know, it wasn't chemical engineering, but I was making ends meet. And I think one thing about this story is even when I was in and out of school, I never allowed myself to just sit around. I always was doing something, whether it was working at Hardee's or the country club. I was a pizza guy in the dining hall here at Mojo. And then, you know, this was where, you know, I probably had the longest of jobs in this interesting path. And so this was what I did for a while. It was weird. I was 23 years old with no degree, and I was, you know, working at a grocery store. So I really didn't know what was in store for my future. And honestly, I felt like a failure. I felt like I had wasted every opportunity that was given to me. I was talented enough to get into this incredible school, which even standing here, like it is an incredible school, but I came here and squandered, you know, the numerous opportunities that they gave me to come back and try again. And it was really hard for me to forgive myself for that. And so at the time, I was at Macomb Community College. I was taking some courses. I think I was going towards like an associate's in business or something like that. Because I wanted to get reinstated if I was going to try and come back here. And I was doing well, but, you know, it wasn't, you know, chemical engineering at University of Michigan. Two completely different, you know, calibers of courses. And something also that came into play with this was, you know, I don't want to go too off topic, but I was in a pretty serious relationship at the time. It was someone that I met here. Even standing here, I don't think it was meant to be, but I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with this person. So even though this school thing was awful and I didn't like being Nick Gregorich, I was like, okay, you know what, at least like this part of my life is okay. And during this time, we unexpectedly broke up. And it was largely because she didn't think I was going to figure this out. So now we're heading into Christmas of 2014. I am alone. I am working at the deli. And so around this time, I remember this so vividly. I dug into the archive here. So I was working in Nino's this entire month here in December. And I remember too, because Christmas and Christmas Eve, people are getting party platters, you know, cheese and meats on these, you know, big dishes. And so I was there, you know, making these, and I even worked into this weekend. And someone that had a huge, you know, piece in the story is Dr. Susan Montgomery. She was really the first mentor I ever had and played, you know, an incredible role in this transformation. And so we had a phone call on this day when I was driving home from work. And, you know, I kind of had an idea of wanting to come back at some point, but even at the moment, you know, I didn't think it was going to happen. And we were on the phone. I was like, you know, what are you thinking? You know, because I was going to come back. Thermal and fluids was where I left off, and it's only offered in the spring. So if I didn't come back in spring 15, I would have to wait a whole other year to spring 16. And so she was like, oh, what are you thinking? I was like, well, you know, I'm not opposed to it, but like, you know, I can't afford it. You know, I work at a deli. You know, I make like $9 an hour. I don't have any money. And she was like, well, we'll figure that out. I'm like, okay, well, where am I going to live? She was like, you got to figure that out. We'll figure out the other thing. So I gave it a couple of days to marinate. And then on the first year, I decided I was going to do this. But I didn't realize, you know, I have like 6 days to figure this out. I am not enrolled. I have nowhere to live. And I have no money. So I started searching on January 1st here, knowing damn well that, you know, in 6 days, the semester started. So this is also, you know, pretty funny, you know, today, which is great, you know, they have these Facebook groups where you have to have approved, you know, Michigan emails.edu to get in, and you can find roommates and sublets and housing and stuff like that. We did not have that 10 years ago. So I had to use Craigslist. And this was, you know, weird to say the least. And also funny that I'm so glad my Michigan email doesn't expire, because I found the email that got me a house. And so I was on Craigslist, you know, firing away at these housing postings. And I found the one that got me the apartment that I ended up living at. You know, crazy story. There was this group of 4 people, and one of them, you know, had a falling out with them, and so all of a sudden this was available. So I came here, like, and checked it out, and that's the apartment right there. It's over on North Thayer. Angela's used to be right here, and then, you know, North Quad's right here. So I showed up, and the place was legit, and I was like, okay, like, I guess this is where I'm living. So I found an apartment, and honestly, what was great about this apartment is these people were extremely driven. I actually texted one of them yesterday, and like, he went to Johns Hopkins for medical school, and another one went to Columbia for med school. So these people were very, very academically driven. It was a good environment for me to be around during this turnaround, right? So yeah, you know, a week ago I was working at Nino's, and I don't think I actually gave them a 2 weeks notice, but I was like, hey, apparently I'm going back to school. So I remember going to my parents' house and really just packing the Buick with what I could, clothes, my laptop, and just the bare essentials to fit in this very tiny room. And I remember leaving, and they were like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going back to school. And they were like, where? And I was like, at Michigan. They're like, are you serious? I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, how are you paying for that? I was like, oh, I got to figure it out. But when I went back this time, I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of doing this and earning a degree here and accomplishing something for my own well-being. So this is what I moved into on North Thayer there, brought the bare minimum. And I was like, this is it. You know, this is my last chance. I said, if I don't figure this out now, I don't know when I'm going to get another opportunity like this. Both sets of grandparents, you know, were helping me financially, and however, you know, this was figured out, it was, and Dr. Montgomery definitely had a huge hand in me being able to do this. So I am forever grateful for that opportunity. And when I went back, I was like, I need to change something. And so the biggest thing with me, like I said, is that with my depression, I would just sleep in bed all day. I didn't want to get out of bed because I didn't want to deal with being me. So that was one of the biggest things that I needed to overcome. And so I wanted to get more into a routine. So I went to bed at the same time every day. I got up at the same time every day, and meal prepping became a huge thing. You eat 3 times a day and get myself in a routine to force myself out of these horrible habits that I had when I was at my worst. And there's a couple quotes that I really appreciate. And this one right here is one that I'm not sure if my therapist passed this along to me, that I was still, you know, I've been seeing the same therapist since I was like 12 in like the Grosse Pointe area. And this quote, if you get up in the morning expecting to have a bad day, you will rarely disappoint yourself. And I'm like, man, that is so true. If I go to bed and say tomorrow's going to stink, tomorrow is probably going to stink. And so I had to tell myself that, you know what, the first 2, 3, 4 years that I was at Michigan, like those were awful, but now was a fresh start. Even though my overall GPA was always going to be affected by that, this was a new chapter and a new opportunity for me to show that I'm a different person. And so, like I said, yeah, I found myself to get in a new routine, better sleep schedule, eating meals, and then 2 of the biggest things that I still use today are meditation and diary writing. One of the biggest problems with me when I get in my own head with my depression is that I keep rehearsing things over and over again that are bothering me. And so if I put them down on paper or in like the new diary journal thing on Apple is really nice. I use that, and it allows me to get thoughts away from my brain and in somewhere else, and I don't have to keep like thinking about them. Okay, so now I'm back in thermal and fluids. My cart caption is with me in the front of the room. So this is 2015. I am 23 years old, about to turn 24, in a classroom full of 19-year-olds that are about to turn 20. Now, at my age at 34, 4 years feels like nothing. I am dating someone right now that is 5 years younger than me, but quite honestly, she is way more mature than I am. But when you're 23 years old in a class of 19-year-olds, I felt like a grandpa. And so I did not want anyone to talk to me. I kept to myself. I sat in the front of the classroom, and because I just sensed that if I start interacting with people, they'd be like, well, what do you mean you're 23? Like, what do you mean you know this, that? you keep peeling back the layers and you get closer to stuff that I'm just quite honestly not comfortable talking about with these people. And so it was interesting to say the least. But I figured this out. The routine was so instrumental in me applying myself and doing well in these courses. And so there's certain emails that hold a lot of weight that even to this day, I have them saved and printed and plastered in my memory. And so this one right here, Dr. Scott used to be the professor of thermodynamics for chemical engineers. And even to this day, I think that was the hardest course I've ever taken in my life. Having now taught this course at Clemson, it is spread into 2 semesters. But here at Michigan, it is all crammed into 1 semester, and it is extremely aggressive. Yeah, I don't know what other way to describe that unless you've taken that course before. But this email, he emailed me to let me know that not only had I gotten the highest grade on the thermal final, that I got an A. And let me tell you, I can't describe what that feeling was, not just achieving that, but the fact that he reached out to me to let me know. And ironically, I actually emailed him last week that I was doing this, and he wrote a really nice message back. So that was really nice. But anyways, so this was the semester I came back. I got A's in thermo and fluids, and then I got a B in this medieval Europe course, which I was a little bummed out about. I was like, dang, I was so close to getting a 4. Man. But this was unbelievable. I had proven to myself that I was capable of doing this. I was able to be a chemical engineer at Michigan. And so this is another email that I hold near and dear. So Dr. Montgomery reached out to me to let me know that I had gotten my GPA over a 2.0, and that it was one of the biggest improvements she'd seen as a faculty member. One of the nicest emails that anyone has ever sent to me. So those 2 emails, I will always remember this era of going from not having a degree and not knowing if I was capable of being a college student to now having this tremendous semester. Okay, so now I'm back, and I'm like, dang, I figured this out, but here's the problem. My overall GPA is still like a 2. So even though I just did so well this semester, no one was going to hire me. You start going to office hours, people realize you're doing well in these exams. And so, oh, what do you do this? That people, they're going to Dow, DuPont, Air Liquide, and Exxon, and BP, and Shell, and all these incredible companies. And like, Nick, what are you doing this summer? I was like, yo, man, like, ain't nobody gonna hire me. I'm going back to the deli, right? Like, my GPA is so bad, no one is gonna want a piece of this. And it was difficult for me to navigate this because I was like, man, if I was this person 4 or 5 years ago, I could have gotten any internship that I wanted. And even when I finished this time of being back at Michigan, it was really hard for me to forgive myself for this, because as soon as I would apply for any of these, like the next morning I would get like denied. Like they wouldn't hire me because they just completely filter out my GPA. And so, yeah, it was difficult for me to forgive myself for these early struggles. And, I think I've mostly forgiven myself, but it still is challenging for me to forgive myself for those early years where, I was getting a half GPA and really just torching, my overall GPA at the school. And so some other fun pictures along the way. The turkeys on North Campus can be a little frisky sometimes. And so this was one of the ones during the time that was like getting in front of buses and stuff. And he came right up to my car. But yeah, I was digging through some old photos, and this one. So here is where I got my first break. So Matt Holcomb right here got his chemistry degree here in 1985. One of the coolest people I've ever met. He was the pool boy at the CCRB. And I think he lived in either West Quad or South Quad. He then went on to get his PhD at Stanford in like a chemistry physics combination. And even though he's not an engineering by training of his education, he is a chemical engineer in my book. What I was working for under him was beyond pure chemical engineering. I was able to get an interview at this guy's company called Grid Logic. And it's a startup in the Auburn Hills area. And everyone there had a PhD. There was, a secretary and like a staffer and people in the machine shop that would do welding and machining of materials. But everyone else had a PhD, chemical engineers, material science, physics, all that stuff. And he decided to hire me as his first intern. And I think, it's naturally, well, you got lucky, and I agree, but I'm a big believer that hard work doesn't go unnoticed. And whether it's now or in 10 years, a door is going to open for you when you least expect it. And this was the one that opened and honestly completely changed my life. And so I went from thinking I was never going to get an internship to working for this guy and being introduced to research. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I was going to show up and give it everything that I had. And so I went back and looked online. I worked on this ARPA-E project that was pretty cool. It was these permanent magnets of manganese bismuth that were used in like the magnets of like EV cars. And so we were synthetically trying to make these because they're mined out of the earth in China and they're extremely expensive. So this was my first exposure to research, and there were so many things about this experience that I still carry with me today. One of them is always be on time, especially in the professional world. Never be late, always be on time. Meetings, he took being on time so seriously. And on top of that, the way he organized his lab book, it was beyond organized. Everything was dated, timed, the temperature in the lab that day, the humidity, the labeling of all his samples. He took it so seriously. He told me, he's like, Nick, when you research, like, you never know, in 6 months or years, we're gonna have to go back and figure out data from another lab book from way back then. And if you're not organized, you're never gonna be able to figure out the answer. And so anybody that worked for me at Clemson or my interns now at Oak Ridge will echo that I take this very seriously with being organized with anything in life, but in particular, your lab notebook with your data. So being on time and the way I organize my lab book are two things that I still hold near and dear. So then I'm working for Matt, and we were at lunch one day. He was like, so what are you gonna do after you graduate? I was like, I don't know, find a job. He was like, you should go to grad school. I was like, Matt, I'm never going to get into grad school. I have like a 2.0 GPA. He was like, no, you don't understand. Like you are meant to be in research. Like you're so good at this. It's like you need to go to grad school. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to get in. He goes, well, how do you know that? I was like, okay, maybe he's got a point. So what he wanted me to do when I went back to Michigan in the fall was to join a lab here and keep doing research to build my portfolio of like being involved in different groups. And so Dr. McGrath taught my fluids class twice because I failed the first time. And so I ended up joining her group for at least a year and a half. And I was doing some of the circulating tumor cell stuff with the microfluidic device, and was working under a mentor there, and it was great experience. So now I'm back in school, and I have this internship that I know is set for the summer. And when I'm here, I'm doing academic research in Dr. McGrath's lab, which was wonderful. So I continued doing well in my courses, and found my way to graduating. This was quite the moment. Thinking that 2 years prior, I didn't know where my life was headed, to then gaining that degree, it was an incredible accomplishment. These are some fun photos from when I graduated at the Block M and Stadium. And then this was I really kept to myself when I came back, but Sharmila was very persistent. So this was probably my closest friend that I met when I was here, and she actually got her PhD at Michigan State and just recently graduated. So one of my very, very dear friends. Some other fun photos. The chemical engineering department does these cool composites. So this was me when I graduated. Could not grow a beard in these days and look a bit younger. So just another fun photo outside of the Dow building. But this is interesting to look at. So this is my final grocery list of academic standing. We were on probation, and then we got withheld. We got reinstated, brought back to good standing, got withheld, reinstated, withheld again, then put on leave, then reinstated, then withheld again, put on leave a second time before then get reinstated and restored to good standing. It's wild to look at this and think that I finally figured this out. I'm just forever grateful for everybody that believed in me at a time when I didn't believe in myself. And honestly, I think that's just one of the purest forms of mentoring, is someone else telling you that you can do this. And to me, that was, Matt and Dr. Montgomery at the time. So I'm so grateful for that. Okay, so now I want to go to grad school. But I still have like a 2.4 GPA. And even though the last like 2 years, I think I had a 3.4 or 3.5 somewhere in there, plus or minus 0.1. I had no idea if I was going to get in anywhere. And so we applied to a lot more schools than I would recommend any of my mentees applying for. Someone that works for me at Oak Ridge just applied for like 6 schools, and got into Penn and Georgia Tech. So I'm really excited for her. But she didn't do what I did in school. So I started applying, and I found all the schools and went back and looked like which ones I got in and which ones I didn't. So I applied for Case Western, and I got denied like the next morning. Like they didn't even give me a chance. So I was like, man, that was like $65 that I just punted away. And this was also, I think the GRE is not, it's not necessary anymore for applying to grad school. And this was a time when I needed it. So I think I also sent, on top of the 5 freebies, I paid to have my GRE score sent there. So I was like, man, that was rough. And this just continued. I got denied from Pittsburgh, Michigan State, UConn, Colorado State, Illinois Institute of Technology, UIC, and just, I didn't think I was going to get in. The good thing though was that Matt hired me on full time at GridLogic under the impression that I was going to leave, but I went back and kept working on that magnet project with the cars. So even if for some reason this fell through, I would have probably been fine there for some period of time. Then got denied from Oklahoma before finally getting into Clemson. And so I went back and found the email where I got in. And honestly, this was one of the most memorable days of my life. I couldn't believe that someone took a chance on me. The fact that Clemson actually took the time to look through my whole application and saw that in these last 2 years that I was a new person, it meant so much to me. And I'll forever be grateful that they took a gamble on me, because my overall GPA was still extremely low. But they believed in me, and I got admitted into their program. So this is where I ended up going to school. I got to actually go to like the recruitment visit, and I met my advisor. And I was like, okay, like this is where I'm meant to be. The other schools, I got into Toledo. I'm not sure whatever happened with Rochester. And then I got denied from Wayne. And I got into Auburn, but it was after I accepted my offer at Clemson. That is my story here at Michigan. I was gonna show just a couple things of like what I do at Oak Ridge and a little bit of just what went on at Clemson, and some closing thoughts about my story. But coming here and doing this and getting into grad school, this was really a really transformative time for me. And it really just goes to show that it's never too late to consciously decide that you want to make a change in your life and go down a different path, whether that's personally or professionally, whatever area of life. I was 4 years older than all of my peers. I had done so much damage to my academic record here, but I came back and somehow figured this out. And now I got into Clemson, where I actually had a clean slate. I wasn't going in with this, sub 2 GPA and this academic grocery list of issues with me, here as a student. So this was the title of my dissertation and my committee. My advisor was Eric Davis. I'm just going to skim through this. I worked on hydrogels for separations of like textile dyes and like your clothes. Hydrogels are like your eye contacts and wound dressings. So it was a really polymer chemistry, fundamental transport, and mechanical rheology type of dissertation. And we were incorporating a waste product from the paper mill. So whenever the wood comes in, they separate out your cellulose to make your paper products, your sticky notes, your notepads, your paper towels. There's a waste product with every separation. And that waste product in this case is lignin. And when it's recovered and cleaned, it's a hot additive for a lot of green materials. So this is what they looked like after we incorporated it. And just some fun pictures. When I went to Clemson, I wanted to be more than just a chemical engineer. And even now, with wanting to come back and be a faculty member somewhere, I know that my personal experience as a hearing impaired student and also my story are just things that are always going to be, really important to me. So I won various awards. This was the day that I packed up here in Ann Arbor and drove to Clemson. I actually won Graduate Student of the Year at Clemson when I was about to graduate, which was incredible. But if I'm being honest with you, this was perhaps my favorite moment of graduate school. My mentee, Jaden, who worked for me for like 4 years, she went to a conference with me, AICE, and placed in one of the poster sessions and got a trophy. And I love mentoring and having people on my team and growing them into your brand and watching them develop as an independent researcher and then go and accomplish things like this. These types of moments just mean so much to me. So she's very special to me. And now it's incredible to see what has happened with my story and people getting wind of it. So I spoke at my graduation. This is a really special mentor, Dr. Dumas at Clemson. It taught me a lot about leadership and managing people. I spoke at the biggest donor event of the year at Clemson 2 years ago. And then recently they did a project on me for the celebration of their centennial. This was our research group and just some of the pieces that were involved in this. So then I'll quickly go through just kind of what's going on here at Oak Ridge. I'm now a postdoctoral researcher there. And I think one of the things I really appreciate with what I do now is we're very applied with our research. I felt like in grad school I was doing very fundamental, transport and polymer chemistry for the purpose of publishing papers and getting my degree. But now we're really worried about energy and dollars and cents and really trying to take our research out of the lab and putting it into the real world. And so I work on carbon capture, which is basically a fancy term for removing CO2 from power plant emissions, natural gas, coal burning, and also the ocean. And so we're all familiar with the world getting hotter. The CO2 concentration continues to increase, and the world is 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than it used to be. So we're looking for ways of removing this CO2, and basically the way that people are capturing CO2 predominantly from power plants is with amines or toxic chemicals. And what I use is it's called diethyl sebacate. It's a green compound that is found in skins and conditioners and perfumes, and also non-alcoholic carbonated beverages. And so we're using a green solvent to capture CO2 in a more energy efficient process. And so we were recently in an entrepreneur program with this, and we called ourselves Green Capture. This is kind of the separation process where the gas is on the inside of these tubes, the solvent is on the outside, and this interface is created here where the solvent captures the CO2 away from the power plant emissions that go into the air after we get our energy. I'm gonna skip through this. Really, the biggest takeaway from this is just that when I did senior design here, we did a lot of sizing of equipment and energy and trying to develop this process with our team. And now I'm actually doing a lot of this at my job with thinking about labor and pump costs and stuff like that. And what's interesting about this is if you capture a ton of CO2, the government gives you $85. So in this thought, I was like, okay, well, if I capture it for $84, then I'm making $1 on every ton. But then you're like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. But when you think about power plants putting out anywhere from 2 to 6 million tons of CO2 a year, well, now you can support a small company. And we think that right now we're at like $93. So the last part I just wanted to show real quickly, this is my team of interns right now. They really like this ocean stuff. And as I mentioned, I love mentoring. So 30% of all the CO2 that's been emitted has dissolved into the ocean. And so the upper crust of the ocean is 26% more acidic than it used to be. And so the DOE is looking for ways of removing CO2 from the ocean to bring the pH back to where it was to protect our aquatic life. It's actually really harmful to shellfish. It melts their shells like crabs and clams and coral reefs and things. And so the concentration of CO2 in the ocean is actually 140 times greater than in the air. So the thought behind it is that if I can remove even 10% of the CO2 in the ocean, now I have a void in that sponge where nature can do its work and the ocean can continue to pull the CO2 out of the air. So I'm protecting aquatics and I'm also helping decrease the CO2 concentration in our atmosphere. And so there's a few popular ways of doing this. This is one of my projects where we're directly trying to remove the CO2, but with this one here, we're saying, wait a second, what if we take base and put it into the ocean, directly raise the pH, and now I'm making that sponge bigger than it was before. So I'm protecting aquatics, and I'm also pulling CO2 out of the air to decrease, you know, this high amount that we have in our atmosphere. And so we're partnered up with a critical mining facility, because now, so these molecules, for one of them, for instance, is calcium oxide. And when the calcination of limestone is used in the concrete industry, but it uses like 1,000 degrees Celsius, and it's really not energy efficient. But at critical mining facilities, when they pull out these rare earths that are used for various processes, there's a pile of waste that sits there, and 15% of that is this calcium oxide. So this grant that I got, my first grant that I became a co-PI on, we're trying to isolate these alkaline components to put them into the ocean to raise the pH and also pull the CO2 out of the air. It's called ocean alkalinity. And so I'll wrap things up here. So these are my interns that I'm mentoring right now. They're all active students at the University of Tennessee. This is our group here. This is my PI, Syed. And just some closing thoughts. Like I said, I think that, you know, in any area of life, it's never too late to consciously decide that you want to make a change and go down a different path. I really think that if I found a way to figure this out, that I think anyone can change any aspect of their life, whether it's school or your personal life or changing your job. And I think that hard work doesn't go unnoticed. You know, whether it's not now or in 5 or 10 years, a door is going to open and provide you an opportunity when you least expect it. And so something I also want to close with is that it's important to not overthink your GPA. Even now at Oak Ridge, having gotten my PhD at another school, and this is not a knock on where I got my PhD at Clemson, but when I interact with people, I'm like, oh, you know, where'd you get your bachelor's, your PhD, and things like that? People go, whoa, like you went to Michigan? And I didn't realize that until I left here and I'd gotten a better perspective of how special this school is and also how powerful this degree is. One thing I want to point out, and this can be shared elsewhere, is that the intern program at Oak Ridge is exceptional. And if there's anybody that's, you know, looking for an internship, especially, I know the fall and the spring would require you doing co-op and maybe taking a gap year, but you know, if you reach out to me and you're interested in working on some of this CO2 capture ocean stuff, especially next year in the summer, you know, I'd love to chat with you and see if we can figure something out. So that is everything I have today. So thank you for chatting with me or coming here, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Yeah.
Somebody could hear this talk and think that you had depression and then you decided to change it and now you're good. You explain what the ongoing process is of dealing with.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like I was saying earlier, at least depression for me is like a sine wave, and the waves don't happen as much as they used to, but they still do occur. In those days, it was you know, every single day thing. But now, at least a few times a year, I will definitely find myself in a low, and that's why, you know, it's so important that, you know, I continue to do therapy. And like I said, the biggest thing with me I'm able to recognize when it's about to occur. And what I do is I don't allow myself to stay in bed all day, and I don't allow myself to overthink things, which I'm really, really good at doing. So really just forcing myself to stay in a routine and realize that these are going to continue to happen. And I always remind myself that if I got over this, like this is, you know, very small compared to what I used to have to deal with. And yeah, just diarying is a huge thing for me. But yeah, that's a great question.
What advice do you have for students coming in now? I guess what advice would you give yourself now? Would you go back? What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could when you were starting?
It's a great question. I definitely thought about this before. The advice I would have given myself at the time is I should have taken time off earlier. I should have stepped away when I realized that I wasn't able to do this. But the uncomfortability of not being with my peers at school here and coming back with no friends was hard for me to accept. And also just selfishly, I kept thinking that I was going to figure this out. But I think if you're struggling with school and you realize that, you know, you're not the best version of yourself, I think the best thing to do is to step away and take time off. Because when you do finish your degree, no one cares how long it took you to do it. They care that you have it. And that was something that was hard for me to realize until, you know, I finally finished and said, you know what, I probably should have just taken a year off when I was much younger. And yeah, I think that's
When you came back the last time and started crushing it, were classes, did it seem easier? I mean, these are hard subjects. These are really, you know, chemical engineering are really, really hard degree. And did your mindset, your change in habits, make everything seem easier, or were you just able to do things at a different level because of the changes that
a great question. It definitely didn't feel easier. It just, I think when I came back and I was doing well, it felt like I was actively caught up with where we were at in class. I might not necessarily understand every single thing that was going on, but in the past, I always felt like 3, 4, and 5 weeks behind what was actually being taught in class. And I just, you know, in that time, I didn't do anything but school. And I just went to office hours and really just forced myself to learn everything in that prior week that was involved. The homework, that was really what was a validation that I was, you know, caught up with what was going on. That's a great question. I've never been asked that before. I think, yeah, it's mostly just the weekly homeworks and the classes that I always made sure I'd finished, really even like a day or two before they were due. And that to me was verifying to myself that I had done enough that week to keep up with where these classes were moving. But they definitely didn't feel easier, but were definitely still extremely difficult.
When do you feel like you finally understood you were what you thought?
That's a great question. I would say it happened after I left here and when I went to Clemson and carried over the momentum I had here into that new slate. And now having been in 2 environments and 2 kind of different degrees, doing well there. And also being a little more open about this situation with some of my closest friends. And having an idea of like who my inner circle was and who I could trust and who understood me and accepted me. That was one of my biggest worries, is what people were going to think when I started sharing these things with them, and knowing that it took me so long to finish school, because a lot of people didn't know that. But yeah, I would say it happened at Clemson when I was doing well there. It gave me, and just, yeah, you know, as I just got older and had an idea of who the types of people that I wanted to be around and how I wanted to represent myself. But here, I think I was so like, all that mattered to me was getting my degree, and making myself a happier person. And when I left, when I felt like I had those 2 things figured out, it gave me more time to evaluate like who Nick Gregorich was. When now thinking about finishing this terminal degree, so it's like, what do I want to do with my career? Like, what matters to me? That's a great question.
Well, the first one is also remembering when the honor society kids were wondering why you weren't joining the honor society. They were like, why aren't you doing that? I just, you know, so that must have been a lot of stress, right? Like hiding the secret. from the honor society that wanted to join, but you just felt like couldn't join.
Because my GPA was too low.
Right,
Yeah.
so- And they didn't know that, so. But the follow-up question to his is, do you like being the primary?
Yes. Yeah. And the reaction that I've gotten from like students at Clemson when I was teaching courses, and then anyone that I mentor, the ones that I really like, I welcome them in a little bit and let them know like about me. And the reactions I've gotten from those relationships have really made me like realize that this story can be used to inspire people. And I love what I do right now. I have an incredible job. I work on stuff that is so applicable to what we're trying to solve with the real world. And I have a team that enjoys working for me. I'm the happiest I've been. Like,
Hard to find the
people. I would say no, because something I didn't say today is when I went back to school, I didn't want people to know that I was going back to school because I hadn't finished. So I actually lied that I was getting a master's. And that was a way of fending off the question of what do you mean you're not finishing your degree? And so I had anxiety with telling my closest friends that no, this is actually what was going on. And I was worried that they were going to think differently of me or not be my friend anymore. And that didn't happen with me. So I'm sorry, what was your question again? I'm so excited with that. Yeah, no, them being accepting of me for this story, and even some of the deeper, darker details of what was going on like 10, 15 years ago, like them being accepting of me, meant so much to me. So it wasn't as hard as I thought it was gonna be because no one didn't want to be my friend anymore.
Thank you so much for being here.